I'm delighted to welcome Brian Librach, a leader in the retail world, to the podcast. Brian's career began at 21 as a district manager, swiftly rising to regional director by 25, director of stores by 35, and VP of stores of Urban Outfitters at 38. And he later served as VP of stores and operations at Pacific Sunwear for leading Old Navy's Canadian operation. And today, Brian's journey exemplifies his unwavering dedication to excellence in retail leadership. Brian, welcome to the Real Retail Podcast, and congratulations on your book being an Amazon #1 bestseller in business management and coaching and business management categories. Without further ado, Brian, can you share with us a bit about your background and how it led to you writing the Retail Leaders Roadmap?
Yes, thank you for having me on the show as well. It's been a journey. I like to say it was 11 months of putting pen to paper and 35 years of grinding out the work itself. I'm a retailer. I say it, jokingly. My father was a retailer. My grandfather was a retailer. And if you look my last name up in Google, you're going to find retailers back in Poland dating back to the 1800s. So somehow, some way, it sticks in the blood. The book really was an opportunity for me to put pen to paper on 3.5 decades of work and me find a way to help more folks out than I could within one organization and really spread the wealth out. I have a commitment to help 2.5 million people positively impact their career. And although I know I've impacted some along the way, this is my way of being able to broaden that reach. Obviously, talking with you folks outside of the United States and Canada and North America as well. So just looking forward to doing that work.
Perfect. I think we had a little. I think we're having a little technical. Brian, you're back. We had a little glitch.
No worries.
Perfect.
It
Wow,
happens.
thank you. This is interesting. And then there's certainly this inspiration that you have been looking at, and then that helped you focus specifically on the retail leadership in the book, because retail is a very vast environment or sector, if you want to say, and specifically talking about leadership is something very interesting, but very few know how to address and talk about. So why did you pick that specific topic in this book?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first book that I'll write. I will write more, but this one I wanted to be really about my journey and what I really truly have to offer. I believe what I have to offer helps any leader in any industry. However, retail is an industry that I'm very, very familiar with. And so I wanted to stick with that and really speak to that and help those that are in retail out that may not have those resources at their disposal. I was lucky enough to work for some great people and some not so great people, but I want to be able to be that person for others that they can leverage to, I refer to it in the book as get unstuck, write and rewrite their career outcomes so that I can help them put better quality food on the table for their families. And it's through people. So much of today's conversation is about technology. And yes, in the retail landscape, there will be less jobs in the next 25 years than there are today in terms of true retailers, but there's still going to be millions and millions and millions of people. It's not going to be like all of a sudden it doesn't exist. And so how do I help folks balance between the technology conversation and the people conversation? And people productivity is a thing. Obviously we know AI and all of these other tools are going to help companies be more productive. We know that the robot in the distribution center is going to help us be more productive, but people are productive if they're led correctly. And right now, I would be generous to say people are giving 70% of what they're capable of today in the retail environment, primarily because they're just not emotionally engaged in the work right now. And companies have to do a better job of connecting with them to get them to be able to deliver 100% of what they're capable of. And that alone will buy millions, if not billions of dollars. I read something the other day, I actually put it in my web page for speaking notes. Only 36% of people in the US are actively engaged in work. Like the rest of them are disengaged in work. And that's a problem. And it costs the US almost $500 or $600 billion in productivity a year. So that's why I did it. I want to make sure that I'm in the people productivity business and finding ways to share that wealth as best I can.
Interesting. And then I think it resonates to the subtitle of your book that mentions taking control of your career. I mean, could you elaborate on what that could mean to retail leaders today, how they inject back that motivation, putting that human interaction at the heart of the retail process?
Yeah, it's tough because I will tell people that, you will be stuck if your boss and your boss's boss don't align to you. So that's
Mm,
outside of your control to an extent. However, your ability to communicate and influence with them and somewhat control the narrative is within your control. And we can't put the control in other people's hands because sometimes it might work out, sometimes it might not. But we're talking about our lives, and we're on this earth for however long we're on it. And so how do we make sure that we get out of it what we're capable of? And part of it is the work that you have to do to own your character, which is the first portion of the book, which is really the foundation. But more so, it's about owning the conversation and owning the narrative and making
yeah.
sure that you're being realistic with what you have to accomplish and what you have to do. And again, this whole concept of meeting your boss where they are, it's a reality that most people don't want to accept. And if you currently today are not aligned with your boss, you either need to figure out how to do it or you need to go find another boss because you will continue to be stuck and feel unfulfilled. it's
Mm,
it's the conversation of balance comes up a lot, I know, around here, around how do you find work life balance. The new phrase is life work balance with the new generation, and I've said it over and over again. I don't think balance exists. I think integration exists and the ability to balance what you're doing at that time. So if you're going to focus in on work for whatever the reason might be, then that's maybe where your attention is. But we have to lean into the hard work of controlling our narrative to the very best that we can.
but on the other hand, don't you believe that some of the workers, employees, or team members um, are a little bit being afraid to speak up or to speak up what's on their mind because they just don't want to annoy? I mean, is it did we lose the sense of conversation and communication, or are we just afraid or lazy maybe to just go in there and start what you're suggesting, start doing it?
Yeah, I think part of it is there's very little trust between companies
Mm,
and employees. And I think it's on both sides. I
yeah.
think companies don't trust the employees because they're not as emotionally committed. And I think I know employees don't trust a lot of the companies because there's budget cuts that happen multiple times a year, even when companies are making money.
Mm,
So it's to me, it's trust. And I think the employee has a hard time putting in the effort to have the conversation if they don't think it's going to go anywhere. So I don't think it's lazy. I think it's just why have the conversation if it's not going to go anywhere. My
yeah.
my my feedback would be make sure you know where you stand and don't let your boss not tell you. So if your boss in retail, one of the famous lines in retail is, well, you're just not ready for next. And people will accept that comment without digging in. And if you ever hear that comment, you should ask, well, give me the specifics as to why. Like, what is
Mm,
it that I need to do? And to me, that's the way that you align is you force your boss or their boss to be honest with you and direct with you about what it is that is keeping you stuck, so to speak. And if they won't give you the answers, it's because they don't want to share it with you, and you're probably not going to get unstuck as long as you continue to work for that individual. So I don't know that you know, using your voice to try to completely change the way the company operates is going to work. But I think using your voice to make sure that you can ascend because your bosses are aligned to you, I think there's work worth doing there.
mm, interesting. And in your experience, what are the common challenges that retailers or retail leaders face in advancing their careers? Is it a blockage? Is it this assessment that we come across? And I mean, how do you address those elements in your book and in your real life?
Yeah, I think I hate to say it, but I think as much of a reason why you are stuck in retail is that inner voice, that imposter syndrome that we all have in a lot of ways, and some of us have it more than others, and that we tell ourselves that we're not capable of more. We tell
Mm,
ourselves that we're not capable of doing the things that we truly are, and we do it out of protection. We don't want to be told that we're not. It's just like when you ask your boss for real feedback, you have to be willing to hear the real feedback. And by the way, that feedback may or may not be accurate, but they're in control of your career. So you have to accept that feedback or change their perception. So I think that's the real challenge is our inner voices hold us back more than anything. And I tell people all the time, I went to high school for 3 years. I didn't go to college. And there were multiple times in my career as I ascended to the corner office where I were stuck, and solely because my inner voice was telling me I wasn't good enough. Thankfully, I was quick to shut that inner voice up and continue to do the work, but I recognized it and I observed it. And most people have a hard time observing it. And that inner voice is strong and it will hold
Mm,
you back. So that's one of my missions, is how do I get people to shut that inner voice up, speak up, at first to themselves, let alone their bosses, and then start to have those tough conversations with their bosses that force their bosses to be honest with them and accurate with them, so that they know what they have to do and what they have to do to overcome what their current situation is.
okay, interesting. I read somewhere, but a long time ago, that even that inner voice could be different between men and women. Women
Yes.
have the tendency to be very picky on the judgment of the self, on whether they can do it and do it perfectly, whereas men have the tendency to just like put it all in, whether they know how to do it or not, because they have maybe a different character of addressing things. Do you think there's also a gender issue to address here?
I've read the same thing. I've read about imposter syndrome and how the very high percentage of women have imposter syndrome. And I think, I do think that I know that there's this idea of the need to be perfect.
Mm,
You know, have this idea of needing to be perfect, because if you're not, people won't give you that opportunity.
mm,
That stress will keep you from, I think, exhibiting your true potential.
right.
And it's one of the things that I've thoroughly enjoyed in my career, is that I've been able to work with a tremendous amount of women that have ascended and been able to put better quality food on the table for themselves. My wife works for, her company is called Her Well Wisher, and so she's all about well wishing other women. So yeah, it shouldn't be the case, and nobody should try to be perfect. But I get where a woman and or a minority, for example, might feel that if they're not perfect, right, that they're not going to be able to get what it is that they're capable of getting, and that it shouldn't be something that anybody feels.
Mm. And you mentioned the importance of balancing hard skills and soft skills in this context. Can you provide some insights into how aspiring people or retailers or leaders can develop and balance these skills effectively?
Yeah, I think to me, the hard skills are the character, and that's the first portion of my book. I talk a lot about that because that's your foundation.
Mm,
Yes, there are some skills involved in that, but more often than not, it's the work that you should be doing. Right? You should work hard. You should learn. You should set a good example. You should be accountable, and you should be disciplined. And those five things make up your character. And they're things that at different times you will misfire in. It's just human nature, but you need to recognize quickly. It's kind of like that
yeah,
leak. If you have a leak in your car that it could eventually seize your engine, well, if you catch that leak quickly, it's fine. But if you
yeah,
don't, your career is over. Your vehicle is over. But the shift to the soft skills is if you want to lead people. If you really want to ascend, you can be hugely successful without really great soft skills if your job requires you to just do the job. If your job requires you to lead and influence other people, or if you want to ascend because you lead and influence people that you work for, the soft skill is a requirement. And that's where you shift from physically working hard to mentally working
yeah,
hard.
yeah.
And that's where your communication skills come in. And that's where your influencing skills come in. So the second part of the book really is about that. It's about how do you now that you understand other people will be a part of your success equation, how do you communicate and influence with them? And that was probably where I struggled the most at a certain part of my career, where I felt like my lack of a college education would hold me back communicating with the highly educated, when I realized that was not the case. But again, I had to get through it, and I had to shut my inner voice up and just have those conversations. But I also had to go out and learn a ton. Like, I read a
Mm,
tremendous amount of books, I listened to a tremendous amount of podcasts, and I looked and paid attention to really great communicators and really great influencers, so I can pick up on tendencies. So I think the hard skills, like I said, will help you be successful, but the soft skills will make it to where you can go from good to great.
mm. So we're talking also about putting some actionable steps or strategies to move forward. In your opinion, or what are these strategies that could help us move forward?
Yeah, I think there's a few different things that I talk about, and one is knowing kind of where you are. So every job, every role, every responsibility requires kind of the same stuff to happen. you have to win at your day job. You have to deliver the results. Like, first and foremost, nothing is going to happen if you don't deliver whatever it is that you're being asked to deliver. You then have to have followers, like people that want to support you. And if you do that, then those supporters need to be able to get promoted. You have to help them get promoted. You have to do something for them. And the final step is, because you've done all of those things, now you start to get promoted again as well. But you're not going to ascend in your career if you don't deliver results, have followers, and develop other people. Like,
Mm.
you just won't. It's impossible. You
You have
need
to
those
move
three.
other people to move as well.
Correct. And there are some people that will find themselves getting promoted and ascending without having done that work, but it won't last because it eventually will catch up to them. When you do that work, you do those three things, it's substantial. But the
Mm.
hard part is, when you get a new boss, it starts over again. You have to prove to that new boss that you're willing to work hard, right? Like, so it starts over again. And that's part of what I think is the most frustrating thing about retail, and especially about the current amount of movement that happens with all the budget cuts and just everything else that's happening. We're constantly getting new bosses. We're constantly doing new things. And that requires us to kind of start over a little bit. It
Mm.
doesn't have to hold back. We can start over and get it done quickly, but we do have to start over a little bit. And I think that's challenging. The other part of it that I think is important, because if the first step is delivering results, then you have to be able to deliver results, and that's through people. So you have to, again, understand that people are your priority, and then you have to also prioritize your people, and that's really hard. So somebody is more valuable to you on your team than somebody else, and most people don't. Even saying that out loud makes people cringe. But
Yeah.
somebody has a bigger area of responsibility that requires you to spend more time with them, because the volume requires it, therefore the business requires it, and the team requires it. But there's a way to do that and still get to everybody, and that's the trick.
But this being said, it would imply that we need to reinvent ourselves by doing sometimes the same thing, but doing it differently or making it look differently with different people and contexts. Isn't that a little bit frustrating or difficult to do?
It did difficult for sure, frustrating for sure. But what I found is, the 10 practices that I talk about in the book as an example are the 10 practices that I've been doing for 35 years, and I would say will still be around for a really long time. The difference is, each practice requires different work in different decades. Like, working hard for me 35 years ago is very different than what working hard looks like for me today.
Mm.
And depending on who I work for, they might see what working hard looks like differently. And so it's up to me to know and observe, to know what they think working hard is, and make sure that I'm able to give that to them. Now, I don't want to do it in a way where I'm not being true and authentic to myself, because that is the only way you should be. But if my boss wants something a certain way, and I want to continue to choose to work for that person, I have to find a way to meet them or change their mind. And that's the
Yeah.
hard part. That
Yeah,
that I think is the
exactly.
biggest challenge for people.
Exactly. Everything that we're talking about, and if we just like put it on in one example, it's just finding that equilibrium, constantly finding that equilibrium between what you can do, what you can deliver, and what is expected from you, right?
Absolutely.
And you talk also about the quality of life and career fulfillment. If we can go back to that aspect, this is a crucial aspect that you touch on in your book. So, how can we put a priority to these aspects and still do our jobs well and good? Because retail could be a career consuming, uh, a life consuming
Yes.
area, you know?
At 100%, it can be life consuming, and it was for me many times, where that's all I did. What I talk about is, and what I recommend is, there's three parts of your life that you have to pay attention to at the same exact time: your professional career, your personal, and your self care. And to me, personal is other people. It's things that happen, your family, whatever the case. My personal care is your own health, your own
Mm,
mind.
mm,
And if you don't plan for all three of those things at the same time, you won't accomplish all three things. Now, you might put in 70% of your effort towards work in the first year in a new job. But in that second year, that 70% might become 60%. And in that third year, it might become 50%, which frees you up to spend more time on your personal life and on your self care. But you have to plan for all three things all the time. And you have to put it into your calendar. And a lot of people don't have a problem putting work stuff in their calendar, but I have my workout in my calendar reoccurring every single morning. Like, I have meditation in my calendar reoccurring every single morning, because it's important to me.
Yeah.
and if it's not in my calendar, then I will allow other things to take its place.
Mm.
So if it's also a vacation or it's a time with my family, I put busy on my calendar so nobody can interrupt me. If it's not busy, then I leave it open. But calendarizing your life is the only way that you can get all three of those things accomplished at the same time, knowing though that it's never going to be 50-50, because one, there's three things. And two, even if there were two things, it's never going to be 50-50 if you want to be successful at anything, because certain environments will require you to lean more one way or the other.
Mm.
Um, when my wife had cancer, of course, I'm going to spend more time with her as she's going through all of that work, right? And the reason I was able to do that is because I earned the right by working as hard as I was at work prior to that. So it's all about making sure that you're integrating when you need to, what you need to focus on.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you. Can you share any stories or anecdotes from your own career or from those you've been working with that illustrate these principles that you're outlined in the book?
Yeah,
If we may.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I say it all the time. I've been stuck as many times or more than anybody in this business. Luckily, I've been unstuck equally as many times. And the difference is I pay attention to when I'm stuck and I know it. And so sometimes I've chosen to do the things that have kept me stuck and I've recognized it. And I said, okay, I'm good. Like I'm going to continue to do those things and I'm okay with where I'm at. Being stuck for me in that moment wasn't a bad thing. But more often than not, usually I would recognize a behavior, right? Whether it was I wasn't working hard enough at that exact time. I was let go when I was 30 years old. I'd been a regional director for 6 years. I had started with a new company 10 months prior, which is also why I know to tell people like you have to start over with those same behaviors and you have to show those same behaviors. I was let go and I know I wasn't as open to learning. Like I know it. Like I was egotistical at that time and I thought I knew everything. And because I wasn't as open to learning, I didn't understand how to merchandise fast fashion at the time. As odd as that may sound, I didn't. Um, and so, again, I was let go and I had to take a lesser role with another company and I had to earn my way back up. And it worked out because I earned my way back up to being head of stores by the age of 38. But that was a huge moment for me where I had to recognize that I was stuck in my career because I wasn't as open to learning as I had been in every single year leading up to that year. And there's tremendous more, stuck moments that I could share, but that's probably the one moment that was a tipping point for me. And then going back to being a district manager for the first time in 6 years, I remembered how hard that job was. And I remembered, okay, I'm leading these individuals, and now I remember what it's like. And so it changed me. It gave me empathy that I probably had lost along the way. And I would say from that point forward, the level of empathy that I had for store teams and for district level teams skyrocketed, and it still exists today.
Wow, like this is a reading of self-awareness and being aware, emotionally intelligent to be aware of others and how you can deal with them in that ecosystem, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm, obviously working to get on stage and do keynotes and things of that nature, and really find ways to amplify the voice to help people.
Yeah.
And Eminem in the movie 8 Mile, he said the things that he knew the other person was going to say about him because then he had nothing to say. And so I'll tell people now, 3 years of high school, no college education. I have more tattoos than most people have. Like I rode Harley Davidsons for years. Like I put out there now comfortably the things that some people might judge incorrectly.
Yeah.
But what it does is it doesn't allow other people to discredit the work that I've done. I've made it from literally the stockroom to the corner office through observation and action only. Like that's it.
Mm.
And to have to be that observant and that action orientated requires a lot of work. And that's what I want to be able to offer to folks, because there are a lot of folks in the retail business that didn't go to college, and there are a lot that did that don't leverage the learnings that they had in college. And so whichever route you chose early in your career, you can have a hugely successful career and put great quality food on the table for yourself and your family, but there's still the same type of work that needs to get done.
Right. So, if we're coming now down to the end, towards the end of our conversation, what are some key takeaways or lessons that you hope readers will gain from reading the Leader's Roadmap?
The first thing is they have to own their own shit. Like that's it. Like just own it. like the fourth practice is about accountability, right? The fifth is about discipline. Like there's things that you just have to do, right? And yes, your boss and your boss's boss will be in control of the strings, so to speak, but you can influence and you can control the narrative to some extent. So if you don't own your own shit, then it's, at the end of the day, you're kind of hanging out in purgatory, and I don't know that anybody wants to live there. And that's why people are talking about balance so much.
Yeah.
That's why people are talking about being unfulfilled. It's because they don't own it. And when you fail, own it. When you make a mistake, own it. It's okay. You should fail. You should make mistakes. And so that would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is don't let that inner voice slow you down.
Mm.
And it's back to self. Like own your own stuff, and also don't let your voice be the one that slows you down. Most people are focused on outward, what other people aren't doing and what other people are saying to be the obstacle. Like so much of the work, I'd say 80% of the work is internal. And then lastly, be audacious. I don't remember who wrote it, like the audacious goals, like be aggressive with what your expectations are of what you think you can accomplish. Because, and I talk about it in the book, and this is where I get philosophical, is, what you think and say, like your mind and heart don't know the difference. Like
Mm.
if you think it and say it, your mind and heart react to it, and your body moves based on what your mind and heart says. So if you have a really aggressive timeline and goal, and you say it out loud or think it, your body's going to move in that direction. Your mind's going to move in that direction. And if you don't have that, same thing's going to happen. So I encourage people to have very aggressive goals and timeframes and push towards that. And I only can speak from experience. When I've done that, I've either met those goals or come relatively close one way or the other, plus or minus. So again, my advice there is, like all of my advice, is really more on application and not theory.
Okay, thank you. And to conclude, maybe from my end, I see that the retail landscape is evolving and at a fast pace. How do you see the role of retail leaders changing in the future, and how can your book maybe help prepare them to acknowledge and adopt these changes and work towards them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's evolving at a very fast clip, and over the last 35 years, I think it's evolved equally as fast, but in different ways. I mean, God forbid, I remember when I had to give up my BlackBerry, like that was earth shattering. Like, what do
Yes.
you mean I have to type on an Apple phone? This is absolutely asinine. But jokes aside, people are still going to matter. And the difference today from yesterday, and I think what's going to become more important, is this concept of being an independent contractor. Like, I think employees now are independent contractors. They just happen to be paid by an employer. And it's because of the way employers treat their people. There isn't the loyalty that there used to be. And for a long time, employees accepted it. They don't anymore. And you're seeing that in the workplace today. So employers are going to have to figure out how to engage employees differently, and know that they're only going to have them from 3, 4, or 5 years. And it's still okay to invest in them. And as an employer, they've got to learn how to be better independent contractors and do their own work.
Yeah.
Like, independent contractors, they learn how to do their job by doing it and by investigating it and by following people that they choose to follow, because they don't work for anybody. So they have to figure it out. So employees are used to having it be spoon fed to them. And that's not the case anymore. And that's what this book is meant to be. It's meant to be a resource, along with other people doing similar work, so that the independent contractor, who is the retailer, can get the information that they need. But also, hopefully, not hopefully, but also, companies will come to me and leverage me and people like me to understand and teach them how to better engage their teams, so that both parties, employees and employers, are getting better at the same time.
Wow, thank you. It's really interesting, and I got a lot of information, and I'm going to be thinking about that career of mine today. Because it's true that most of the times we need like to shake up our minds and to reassess, reevaluate how we are doing things and how we have been doing them so far, and maybe what we would like to change in the future. Thank you so much, Brian. Before concluding today, would you like to add any other information, like how we can get your book? I know that your website also has interesting insights. Can you give us some info about those?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, you can get my book right now on Amazon, soon to be on other venues, but Amazon right now is the way to get the book. Ebook is coming, or ebook is available, and the paperback is available. Hardcover is coming soon, as well as the audio is coming soon. I would also say, yeah, check out my website, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do a video every single morning, a video in the morning to kind of get us up and moving. And soon, if you look, you'll find services on my website. You'll find keynote speaker on my website, because that's, again, another way for me to amplify my voice, amplify the voice to get to those 2.5 million people. You can find that on the website as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for sharing all of these info and insights, and hope to meet soon, maybe in Europe or in
That
North
would be
America.
fantastic.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.